face the wall.
I work here. I'm a pilot. Look at my ID.
Turn around and keep your hands where I can see them.
You're making a mistake. I belong here.
We'll sort it out at the station.
Sir, please, this is my crew badge.
Check it. Keep walking.
You're cuffing the wrong guy.
He'd walked this hallway 1,000 times. The carpet was the same faded blue. The walls were the same scuffed off-white. The smell of coffee, jet fuel, and recycled air hung in the corridor that only employees used. But on this morning, a rookie cop was waiting at the end of that hallway, and he'd already decided that the black man in the navy blazer did not belong there. "Sir, stop right there. Hands where I can see them." The pilot froze. His rolling flight bag clicked to a halt. His company badge and airport ID swung against his chest, perfectly visible on a lanyard. "Officer, I work here," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm a pilot. I'm reporting for duty." The rookie didn't even look at the badge. "Face the wall, now." In seconds, the man who had safely landed hundreds of passengers through storms and emergencies was shoved against the concrete, plastic cuffs biting into his wrists. Airport staff stopped and stared. A few took out their phones. They were watching a black pilot get treated like a trespasser at his own workplace. What none of them knew in that moment was that this hallway arrest would end with a civil rights lawsuit and a $2.3 million settlement. And the question hanging over all of it, what does it say about a system when even a uniform, an ID badge, and a spotless record aren't enough to prove you belong? Before we break down how a routine walk to work turned into a multi-million-dollar lesson in power and prejudice, take a second to tap like and subscribe if you care about real stories of accountability, justice, and everyday people standing up to systems that go too far. It helps more people see cases like this. Now, let's rewind. The pilot we're talking about today, we'll call him Marcus Reed, was not some rookie on his first day. He was in his 40s, a commercial airline captain with thousands of flight hours. He'd flown red-eye routes, holiday rushes, and weather diversions that would terrify most people. Inside the cockpit, passengers trusted him with their lives without ever knowing his name. To his co-workers, Marcus was the calm one, the kind of pilot who brought donuts to the early morning briefings, the one who double-checked the paperwork, laughed with the gate agents, and knew the ramp crew by first name. To the airport security system, he was a known quantity. Background checks, fingerprints, federal clearance. Every time he flashed his badge at an employee door, a database somewhere confirmed, this man belongs here. But to one brand new police officer, fresh out of the academy, none of that mattered. What he saw was simple: a black man, alone, in a back corridor. And in his mind, that alone was suspicious. On the morning of the incident, Marcus arrived early. He parked in the employee lot. He rolled his bag across the asphalt, past the other workers heading in for their shifts. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The terminal glass glowed with that pale pre-dawn light. He scanned his badge at the secure door. The lock clicked. He stepped into the quiet employee corridor that wrapped behind the bustling ticket counters and TSA lines. What he didn't know was that earlier that week, officers had been briefed on heightened vigilance. There'd been vague chatter about thefts, unauthorized access, people trying to get where they shouldn't be. For a rookie, that kind of briefing can sound like a license to treat suspicion as proof. The young officer posted at the far end of the corridor had maybe a few months on the job. The uniform still looked crisp, the utility belt still felt new. But underneath the badge, he carried something training can't fully erase: his own assumptions about who looks like a threat. He saw Marcus badge in. He saw him walk confidently down the hall. And instead of thinking, "Employee going to work," something in his mind whispered, "Watch him." So he stepped into Marcus's path and turned a normal morning into a confrontation. "Sir, stop right there." Marcus did exactly that. He set the handle of his rolling bag upright and raised his hands part way, palms open. "Can I help you, officer?" "Employee ID," the rookie demanded. Marcus nodded toward his chest. Right here. I'm Captain Reed. I have a flight this morning. You can scan it if you'd like. But the officer wasn't scanning anything. The body camera footage, later played in a conference room full of lawyers, showed it clearly. The officer glances at the badge for less than a second and then looks away. Step to the wall, he orders. Hands behind your back. Marcus's eyebrows knit in confusion. Sir, with respect, I work here. Ask anyone at the gate. Call the airline. I'm supposed to be in a cockpit in less than an hour. The rookie's voice sharpens. The classic line. We can sort that out at the station. This is the moment that makes viewers' blood boil when they see it. Because everyone watching can see what the officer refuses to acknowledge. The ID badge. The pilot's wings on the blazer. The rolling flight bag that every frequent flyer recognizes. There's no aggression or no resistance, no threat, just a black man trying to get to work. And still, the cuffs, plastic ties cinched too tight. Marcus winces but doesn't pull away. His cheek brushes the cold wall as the officer presses him forward. Airport staff pause mid-step. A gate agent covers her mouth. A baggage handler mutters, That's Captain Reed. A phone camera starts recording. That's when this stops being just a humiliating moment in a back hallway and becomes evidence. Marcus is marched through the public area of the terminal like a suspect. Passengers waiting to board watch as a uniformed officer escorts a man in a pilot's blazer toward an exit. Some assume he must have done something terrible. Others just stare. Marcus feels each stare like a weight. For years, he'd been the reassuring voice over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Now, in front of strangers, he's being treated like a criminal, and he knows exactly why. At the precinct office inside the airport, he's sat down, still cuffed, still trying to keep his composure. Can someone please call my airline? He asks. My crew is going to be waiting on me. But the rookie is filling out forms, typing in a report that later will be torn apart line by line. Words like suspicious, non-compliant, refuse to follow commands, make their way onto the page, even though the video shows a man calmly asking to be believed. Eventually, someone higher up looks at the ID, calls the airline, runs his name through the system. The shift in the room is immediate. Suddenly it's sir, and just a misunderstanding, and you're free to go. The cuffs come off. The marks on his wrists remain. Now here's where many stories like this quietly die. The department apologizes off the record. Maybe someone suggests it was just a training mistake. Maybe they tell the officer to be more careful next time. The victim is expected to swallow the humiliation and move on. But Marcus doesn't move on. He goes home, sits in his living room, and replay after replay, the scene flashes through his mind. The wall, the cuffs, the faces. He thinks about his passengers, who never knew their captain was arrested in the same building where he was supposed to fly them safely home. He thinks about his teenage son, asking why his dad's wrists are bruised, and he decides that if he lets this go, it will happen again, to someone with less protection, less visibility, less proof. So he calls a lawyer. The lawsuit that follows is not just about one bad morning, it's about a pattern. In his complaint, Marcus alleges unlawful detention, false arrest, violations of his Fourth Amendment rights, and racial discrimination under federal civil rights law. The language is firm, measured, and devastating. He didn't lash out, he didn't fight back, he followed every command. And still, he was treated like an intruder in his own workplace. During discovery, the attorneys request everything: body camera footage, internal emails, training manuals, prior complaints. What they find is familiar. A rush to justify. A culture that rewards proactive stops, even when those stops are built on little more than a hunch, and almost nothing in the way of real, meaningful, anti-bias training. If you're watching this and thinking, how many times has this same story played out off camera? You're not alone. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you think this kind of behavior comes from individual prejudice, bad training, or the system as a whole? Because the answer to that question shapes what happens next. In a closed conference room, months later, the rookie officer sits across from Marcus's legal team for a deposition. In front of him is a monitor. On the screen, his own body camera footage begins to play. He watches himself ignore the badge. He watches himself escalate. He hears Marcus calmly say, again and again, "I work here. I'm a pilot." "Tell us," the attorney says, pausing the video at the moment of arrest. "What specifically made you believe Mr. Reed did not have a lawful right to be in that corridor?" The officer shifts in his chair. "He seemed nervous," he says. The attorney presses play. Marcus is standing still, voice steady. "Anything else?" He didn't answer my questions right away." The attorney rewinds to the first exchange. Marcus answers immediately. "So what else, officer? What else besides the fact that he is a black man led you to believe he didn't belong?" Silence. This is the heart of the case. You can feel it even if you've never set foot in a courtroom. Strip away the scripts, the justifications, the boilerplate language, and you're left with one glaring truth. Race was the deciding factor. And when race becomes the deciding factor in who's treated as a threat, the Constitution becomes a suggestion instead of a shield. The city can see where this is headed: a public trial, viral videos, headlines about a black pilot arrested at his own airport. So, before a jury ever hears opening statements, the lawyers for the city and Marcus's team sit down at a long table. On one side, a man who wanted nothing more than to go to work and do his job. On the other, representatives of a system that turned him into a suspect for doing exactly that. The result is a settlement, $2.3 million. To Marcus, it's recognition that what happened to him was not just unfortunate. It was wrong. It violated his rights. It damaged his reputation and his sense of safety. To the city, it's no admission of wrongdoing, a line that appears in almost every settlement agreement like this. To taxpayers, it's a quiet bill for someone else's bad judgment. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. When officers cross the line and cities pay out millions, that money doesn't come from the people who made the decisions. It comes from public funds. We all pay for a system that far too often refuses to admit it was wrong. In the months after the settlement, the department announces new training. Words like Nyornyan implicit bias, Elas de-escalation, and Hundar cultural competency show up in press releases. There are new policies about checking IDs, verifying employment, and documenting reasons for stops. On paper, it sounds like progress. But Marcus knows, and so do many people watching, that real change is slower than any press conference. Real change looks like an officer pausing before acting on a hunch. It looks like actually reading the badge in front of you. It looks like asking one more question instead of reaching for the cuffs. It looks like understanding that a black man in a blazer, rolling a flight bag through an employee corridor, might be exactly who he says he is. A professional, a pilot, someone who belongs. In the end, Marcus keeps flying. He returns to the cockpit, but the hallway feels different now. He's more alert, more aware of the eyes on him when he passes an officer. He still greets the gate agents by name, he still brings donuts to the early flights, but there's a part of him that never fully relaxes in that corridor again. Because he's learned, in the hardest way, that his uniform and his years of service won't always protect him from someone else's fear. Standing at the jet bridge, looking out at the plane he's about to command, he takes a breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," he imagines himself saying over the intercom, "this is your captain speaking." What he doesn't say out loud is the thought that lingers underneath. That before he was trusted with hundreds of lives, he had to fight just to be trusted walking down a hallway. So what do we do with stories like this? We remember that titles, pilot, doctor, lawyer, teacher, don't grant immunity from prejudice. We remember that accountability doesn't end with a settlement check. And we ask ourselves, honestly, when we see someone and feel that instinctive suspicion, is it based on what they're doing or who they are? Because until we can answer that honestly, there will always be another Marcus, another hallway, another video, and another settlement. If you've stayed with this story to the end, let me know what you think in the comments. Was $2.3 million enough? What should happen to officers who turn routine moments into life-altering trauma? And if you want more real stories about justice, power, and the people caught in between, make sure you're subscribed. This isn't just one bad day at an airport. It's a reminder that for some people, proving you belong never really ends.